I mean, look, we all know the Daniels connection to Peterson, but we'll bring Jimmy Kempski from PhillyVoice.com into the conversation. And, you know, Jimmy, obviously his name has been brought up a lot because of the connection, but does it become more apparent as the days go by that Bradford's days are numbered, and that when you hear something like Chase Daniel and, you know, they view him as more as a backup, that it seems more apparent that they want to go that route?
I wouldn't make too much of the I wouldn't call it a report, by the way, that came out today.
That's generous, huh?
I would not call that a report. I would call that an agent kind of saying, hey, want to throw this out there? That's what I call that. But, yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly a big-time possibility that Bradford is not back this season. I can see I can see a scenario where he is back. I think the scenario in which he is back is that he and his camp don't find the market that they were looking for, and the Eagles get him back on a deal that they think he's worth. Failing that, I really don't see him being back if there is indeed a strong market for his services as a quarterback.
Yeah, and, you could franchise players starting just a couple of days ago, and that has not happened for Sam Bradford. They have till the 1st to get something done, and then he would be a free agent. And, Sam is, he's an average quarterback or a good quarterback. He's not a great player. He's not an awful player. He's just kind of there. And do you think, Jimmy, that it just basically the price tag, it just doesn't, the ends don't justify the means? Would the Eagles like him back, but just not at that number, and don't have enough information on him to go long term?
Yeah, I think it's two-sided too. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think the Eagles want to overpay for him. I think, you look at the NFC East, and that is certainly a very winnable division. The Giants aren't good. The Redskins didn't beat anybody last year, although they won the division. The Cowboys, they had injury problems, and I think people overrate how good the rest of the roster actually is, even with Tony Romo back. So that is very winnable division, but should the goal be winning a bad division, or should it be winning a Super Bowl? And I think, Sam Bradford, as being sort of, in my opinion, an average quarterback, not the route that I would go. But on the other side, does Bradford even want to be back? I mean, I've heard, and don't take this as like a report or anything like that. It's more kind of rumory, but I've heard from enough people that he doesn't he'd prefer probably to be somewhere else. And if the opportunities are there, like if a Houston or San Francisco or whoever it may be puts together a decent enough offer, and it's kind of out of the range of what the Eagles want to do, then yeah, certainly he's going to move on.
Jimmy Kempski with us from Philly Voice. Jimmy, Kirk Cousins' name has come up in the last day or so. What are your thoughts as you compare Kirk Cousins to Sam Bradford, just for the Eagle fans out there that go, well, maybe Kirk Cousins would be a good fit?
Cousins is an interesting quarterback. He's not going anywhere. I mean, he and the Redskins are, they're playing games right now. Somebody reported that. I think it was Schefter, actually, that reported that, they had cut off talks or whatever, and then there was, sort of a contradictory report from one of the Washington area reporters and whatever. I mean, it doesn't really matter because whether they get a deal done with him or not, they're not going to let him go. So he's going to get the franchise tag if they can't get something worked out. So he's going to remain on the Redskins. But I do think that when you look at Kirk Cousins versus Sam Bradford, a lot of people bring up the quote-unquote last 7 games that Sam Bradford had this season. Look at the last half of Kirk Cousins' season this past year. That is a quarterback who really played at a high level in the second half of the season. I don't believe that Sam Bradford did. I thought Sam Bradford was okay the second half of the season. I think when you compare that with the first half of the season, it looks a lot better than it really was. But when you talk about a real legitimate, really good close to the season, that's what Kirk Cousins did.
Jimmy Kempski here. I think Cousins is an interesting name to bring up because, as you mentioned, they've kind of broke off talks. They're kind of playing this game. But he might be more a franchise tag for him could be more like, hey, you had a great year. We'll pay you for that year, but you need to show us more. Do the Eagles not have the same mindset of like, hey, we were intrigued enough, but we don't want to give you $20 million and we don't want to go long. It seems like Cousins is more it's more valid to say, hey, we really liked what you did. You had a great year. We will compensate you for that great year, because his year was far better numerically than Bradford's was.
And it was his first year as a full-time starter in the NFL.
Right.
Whereas Bradford has been in the league since 2010. So I think by this point you kind of have a much better idea of what Sam Bradford is. Whereas with Kirk Cousins, that line of thinking makes more sense. Where you go, okay, well, it was great close to the season last year, but maybe let's see a little bit more of that.
It's funny though, Jimmy. Isn't everything with Sam always filled with variables? Like, yeah, he's been in the league. He's been in the league so long. His record's not great, but he didn't have great weapons in St. Louis, and then he got hurt. Well, this year he got off to a slow start because he hadn't played in 2 years. Well, in the second half of the year, he played a little bit better after he maybe was getting. I mean, it seems like there's always a variable tied to him. So I think it's always hard to have a definitive answer on who he is and what he deserves.
Yeah. I mean, his best year ever in the NFL in terms of yards per attempt, which is a pretty good measuring stick for quarterbacks, was 25th in the NFL. And then people go, well, his receivers had a lot of drops, or his offensive line didn't play well, or he didn't have a deep threat, or whatever. I mean, it's crazy the amount of excuses that people will make for quarterbacks, and that just kind of goes to show how badly the need for quarterbacks is in the NFL. I say this all the time, either have a quarterback or you don't. If you don't, you have no chance. So, and you're always going to have, good, 10 teams in the NFL that really don't have quarterbacks. And, you compare your average quarterback against, those 10 or so bad quarterbacks, and you go, well, it could be worse. Well, yeah, you know what? It could be a lot better, too. So I don't think you really should be settling for the average.
Well, and you're right about that. If you don't have a good quarterback, you got nothing, unless you have a Super Bowl level defense, and you wonder if Jim Schwartz has the talent and the scheme to make this that level where a player of Bradford's good to average skill set would work, as opposed to a Chase Daniel.
Yeah, the Broncos were number one in defense this year. You look at the 2000 Ravens that won the Super Bowl with Trent Dilfer as their quarterback. That's thought of as one of the best defenses of all time. You have the 2002 Buccaneers, and now again, another historic defense, the one with Brad Johnson, and then now you kind of have the Broncos, who I think their defense is actually kind of even underrated. I thought their defense was absolutely outstanding this season. They win Peyton Manning. That is nowhere near what we know Peyton Manning to be. Do the Eagles have that kind of defense? I don't think so. I mean, they have some pieces and they have some talent, and with Schwartz, they're going to get to the quarterback more than likely, more than they did in past years with that wide nine or attack nine or whatever nine you want to call it. They're going to get to the quarterback more, and I think they're going to do a good enough job forcing turnovers, and they'll be better than they were last year. But for to kind of say, well, we can win with Sam Bradford because the defense is going to be, exponentially better, I just think that's totally unrealistic.
All right, Jimmy Kempski with plenty on the Eagles in the draft and the Combine coming up next week. There's so much stuff surrounding this team leading up to that draft with pick number 13 and Sam Bradford dangling in the wind. And when Eagles news, check out Jimmy Kempski on Twitter. All right, pal, we'll catch up with you soon.
Appreciate it, guys.
I always like